So, you know that feeling when you have like 42 browser tabs open in your brain?
Oh yeah, the endless mental tabs.
Right. And you're staring at this massive stack of books on your nightstand that you swore you would read by the end of the month.
Which never actually happens.
Never. You've got, three different online courses bookmarked, a dozen deep dives queued up, and just this constantly growing list of topics you desperately want to understand.
You start out with the absolute best of intentions, really. You want to be this incredibly well-informed, well-rounded person.
Exactly. But then the sheer inescapable volume of it all just hits you like a brick wall.
It really is arguably the defining psychological condition of our era, because we're living with infinite information constantly colliding against our very finite time.
And our very finite cognitive energy.
Yes,
And the
exactly.
immediate result of that collision is this crushing, paralyzing sense of information overload. You
Yeah.
try to learn so much so fast that your brain just like short circuits.
And then the secondary emotion arrives,
Mhm.
which is the guilt.
Oh, the guilt is the worst part. You look at the unread books, you feel totally exhausted, and you tell yourself, okay, I'm doing way too much. I just need to let it all go.
Right. I need to relax, step back, just go with the flow.
But then, inexplicably, the second you tell yourself to relax, you feel even more stressed out. Suddenly, relaxing becomes just another daunting task on an already overflowing to-do list.
We find ourselves trapped in this fascinating loop. We stress about learning, and then when we realize the stress is counterproductive, we start stressing about our inability to stop stressing.
It's a total modern anxiety, Ouroboros, just a snake eating its own tail.
It really is.
Well, if you are listening to this and you have ever felt that very specific, very frustrating cycle, you are in the exact right place today. Because for this deep dive, we are looking at a source that completely flips the script on how we absorb information.
It's a really incredible piece of material.
Yeah, we're examining a transcript from a fascinating lecture and Q&A session. It's titled Right Study Fitting the Mass, and this was recorded in Hwasong back in February of 2026.
That's lecture 12039 for anyone who wants to look it up in the original archives.
So what is our mission today?
Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the completely radical, genuinely stress-free paradigm for learning and personal growth presented in this
And
text.
it really is radical.
It is. It's a philosophy that directly challenges our most fundamental, deeply ingrained assumptions about effort, about memory, and honestly, about how we actually grow as individuals.
To really get into the meat of this philosophy, I think we should start with the story of the student who asks the core question in this lecture.
Yeah, that sets the stage perfectly.
Because this student's struggle is just so incredibly relatable. So the transcript notes that during a winter retreat, this student set a very specific, very noble-sounding goal for their own learning. They decided they were going to study, and I'm quoting here, according to the flow of nature. They wanted to only study as much as they could naturally handle.
Completely stripping away any greed or ambition. They just wanted to, go with the flow.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a textbook example of a healthy, mindful approach to learning, right?
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like the perfect antidote to that burnout we were just talking about.
Right. And the student even notes that at first, it worked beautifully. Going with this natural flow felt comfortable. It was fun.
But then, as time went on, the trap snapped shut.
Exactly. The students started feeling like the volume of study being presented to them was increasing. Slowly but surely, it started feeling overwhelming again.
That familiar anxiety crept right back in.
Yes. This intense fear that they wouldn't be able to digest all of this incoming information.
The natural flow they were so desperately trying to achieve suddenly felt like this rushing river, and they were just exhausted trying to tread water.
So the student asks the speaker this really profound question. They ask, is studying naturally supposed to be this busy? Should I try harder to organize my life so I can increase the density of my studying?
Or on the flip side,
Right, they ask, or is the right attitude to just force myself to let go of the study based on my capacity?
and the speaker's response is just brilliant. It catches you completely off guard.
It really does. They point out that the answer is actually hidden right inside the phrasing of the question itself.
Yes, the speaker says the very act of trying, or making an effort to let go, is actually just another form of greed.
Wait, trying to let go is greed.
The text is unambiguous on this point. What's fascinating here is that the speaker highlights how trying not to be greedy is, ironically, a manifestation of the exact same greed.
Oh, wow.
It's still the ego attempting to force a specific outcome.
Okay, let's unpack this because it can sound a little bit like a riddle at first glance.
It does, yeah.
But think about it like this. It's like when you're lying in bed, right? Staring at the ceiling. It's 2 a.m. You have to be up in 4 hours.
We've all been there.
So you forcefully tell yourself, I must relax and fall asleep right now. Relax. Just do it.
And what happens?
The intense effort to force relaxation creates this massive adrenaline spike. The effort to relax is the exact thing causing the stress that keeps you wide awake.
That analogy perfectly captures the psychological insight of the source material. We often treat letting go as an active verb in our culture.
Right, like a task.
Exactly. We treat it as an objective we must conquer or achieve through sheer willpower. But the source argues that forcing yourself to do less is just as unnatural and just as forced as forcing yourself to do more.
Because both actions are driven by this desire to control the environment.
Precisely. The speaker notes that in the study of true principles, there is no need to actively put down or add to anything. The effort itself is the blockage.
The effort is the blockage. Man, if we follow that logic, it creates a massive paradox for you as the listener. Because if making an effort to learn is wrong, and making an effort to stop learning is also wrong, then what is the alternative? I mean, how do we acquire any knowledge at all if we aren't supposed to try?
And that paradox is the gateway to the core paradigm shift of this entire lecture.
Right.
To understand how we are supposed to learn without effort, the source draws a very sharp, very deliberate distinction between two entirely different categories of information.
Okay, and this is where the text separates standard knowledge, which in Korean they refer to as jisik, from truth, or the right path, which is referred to as jungbub.
Yes.
And the way the source describes standard knowledge, or jisik, is deeply familiar. It's basically exactly how most of us have been taught to learn from kindergarten onward.
Right. The text states that knowledge, jisik, is something that inherently requires force. It requires active, deliberate effort. You have to intentionally input it into your brain.
Like cramming for a test.
Exactly. Think of memorizing historical dates, or learning a programming language, or studying the tax code.
Ugh, the tax code.
Right. It requires repetition, memorization, and often a significant amount of stress. It's an active, utilitarian process of ingestion.
It's the flashcards.
Yeah.
It's the highlighters. It's those caffeine-fueled cram sessions before finals. That is knowledge.
But then the source introduces this concept of truth, or jungbub. And truth operates under a completely different set of physics.
Yeah, the source explicitly warns that if you try to force truth into your brain the way you force knowledge, it will actually block the absorption completely.
Because the mechanism of absorption for truth is entirely passive. It's joy-driven.
Joy-driven. I love that.
The text advises that the correct way to study truth is simply to listen when you naturally have the time. And crucially, only because you want to listen.
Not because you feel like you have to.
Right. If you find yourself forcing it, like if your schedule is packed, but you make yourself sit down and study anyway out of a sense of obligation or guilt, the speaker declares that you are literally not studying.
The action is just hollow. It just bounces right off you. The speaker says, just listen because it's good. If it's fun, do it.
And here is the part that I think will resonate deeply with anyone who gets stressed about not understanding a complex philosophical or spiritual topic.
Oh, this is the best part.
You do not need to understand everything. The source says if you understand something, great, you naturally absorb it. If you don't understand it, just let it flow right past you.
It's a complete relinquishment of the need to conquer the material. You're no longer trying to dominate the information.
Exactly.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Because if I am a medical student, I can't just let the confusing anatomy terms wash over me, or I'm literally going to endanger a patient.
Well, sure.
Like if you're trying to catch up on a highly competitive field, or you're just insanely curious about a difficult scientific topic, doesn't it require rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard, frustrating work?
Right, the no pain, no gain mentality.
Yeah. We are so deeply conditioned to believe that no pain, no gain applies just as much to our brains as it does to our muscles. If we just let the confusing parts flow past us, aren't we just being lazy?
That skepticism makes total sense. It's a completely natural reaction because we are thoroughly conditioned by the pursuit of standard knowledge.
Right.
But the distinction the text is making is vital here. The lecture is not talking about technical manuals or surgical procedures or utilitarian skills.
Those belong to the realm of GSIC.
Exactly. The text is talking about Jungbub, the fundamental truths of life, wisdom, and personal evolution. And to explain why forcing wisdom doesn't work, the text relies on a concept called mass.
Ah, right, Jilyang in Korean.
Yes.
Let's break down this concept of mass because it really seems to be the engine driving this whole philosophy.
So in this framework, your mass is your current internal capacity. It's your spiritual density or your baseline level of understanding. The source argues that truth is always perfectly tailored to an individual's current mass. Therefore, whatever you naturally understand and enjoy in this exact moment is exactly what you were meant to absorb.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Right. If you do not understand a concept, it simply means it doesn't fit your current mass yet. Forcing it won't magically expand your mass. It will only create psychological blockages.
It's kind of like trying to pour a whole gallon of water into a tiny teacup.
That's a great visual.
Like, the teacup isn't failing because it can't hold a gallon, right? It's just operating exactly at its current capacity. So if you just let the water flow, the cup gets exactly what it needs to be full.
And the rest just washes away without any stress or damage to the cup.
Exactly. No stress, no broken teacups.
That perfectly illustrates the mechanics of it. You're simply allowing your natural capacity to dictate the pace of your own growth, rather than letting your ego or societal pressure dictate it.
But wait, if I just sit back, relax, let all the confusing parts flow completely past me, and I don't take furious, detailed notes, won't I just forget everything I heard 5 minutes later?
That is the big fear, isn't it?
It is. I mean, what is the point of listening to a lecture or reading a book or even listening to a deep dive like this if you can't remember the specifics to apply them later?
That is the exact anxiety the source anticipates. And the way the speaker resolves this fear is by introducing a fascinating structural framework for how words actually interact with our minds.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting, because the source introduces this concept of quantum energy, or Yangzhe Enioji.
Yes, the text explicitly describes the teacher's spoken words, the transmission of truth, as quantum energy.
Okay, so it wants us to view this not just as acoustic waves hitting an eardrum or data being written to a hard drive, but as an actual energetic transmission.
Exactly.
And to ground this for a rational listener who might hear quantum energy and immediately think of pseudoscience, we can look at this as a framework for subconscious accumulation, right?
Absolutely.
Because the source says the defining characteristic of this energy is that you cannot manipulate it with force. You can't push it, you can't pull it, you can't aggressively shove it into your brain.
It operates completely on its own inherent properties beneath the layer of our conscious controlling minds.
Precisely. Whether we view it literally as spiritual physics or metaphorically as neuroplasticity, the mechanism is identical.
And the only condition required for this energy to do its work is joy.
Joy.
Yeah. The source states that when you listen to the truth and you simply find it enjoyable or interesting or fun, this quantum energy is automatically absorbed by your system. You don't have to consciously direct it.
The lack of stress keeps your mind open and the absorption just happens.
Exactly.
This is the part that serves as the ultimate cure for information overload, I think, because the source directly addresses that intense fear of forgetting.
It does.
The speaker says even if you consciously forget what you just heard, even if it totally slips your mind the second the lecture ends, that energy does not disappear. It becomes superposed.
Right? It accumulates in layers within your soul. The Korean term used here is jungcheop, which translates to superposition or overlapping accumulation.
Wow.
And by introducing this concept, the source is fundamentally redefining the very nature of what learning actually is.
Wait, so if conscious memory is irrelevant, you're saying the actual architecture of my mind is changing even if I fail a pop quiz on the material?
That is the exact implication. In our standard educational paradigm, learning is a cognitive memorization task. Success is measured entirely by conscious recall.
Like, can you pass the test? Can you recite the facts at a dinner party?
Right. But this source removes cognitive recall from the equation entirely. It frames learning as a structural accumulation. Your inner self acts as a receptacle.
So conscious memory is irrelevant to the quantum energy.
Joyful listening is the only mechanism needed to allow that energy to naturally superpose and build up your internal structure over time.
You know, it reminds me of learning a language by living in a foreign country versus studying a textbook in a classroom.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Like when you're sitting in a cafe in Rome, you aren't consciously memorizing the grammar of the people talking at the table next to you, right?
You definitely aren't taking notes.
No. But the rhythm, the cadence, and the structure of the language are superposing in your brain layer by layer like sedimentary rock.
Yes.
And then one day, You just open your mouth and the right words come out. You didn't force it through flashcards. Your internal capacity simply caught up to the exposure.
That is such a great way to conceptualize superposition. The exposure itself, when experienced without resistance, alters the landscape of your mind.
It completely invalidates the anxiety of, I am not studying hard enough.
It really does. If you are engaged and finding the material interesting, the quantum energy is doing the heavy lifting for you beneath the surface. The text literally states the quantum energy works on its own.
That is so incredibly comforting. It means you have permission to just enjoy exploring a topic without the looming pressure of having to perform that knowledge later.
You aren't building a searchable database. You're nourishing your inner structure.
Yes. If you enjoyed the time you spent listening, the energy is already yours. It is locked in.
Which naturally leads us to the ultimate question.
Right. If this quantum energy is constantly accumulating and superposing within us layer by layer, what is the end goal? Where is all this structural change leading us?
And this brings us to the final conclusion made in the lecture. The speaker makes a definitive, sweeping statement. They say the self is quantum energy.
The self is quantum energy, meaning we aren't just like biological vessels holding this energy in some separate container. Our fundamental makeup, our essence, is this energy.
Yes, and because you are made of this energy, you naturally transform, based purely on the quality and the mass of the energy you have joyfully received and absorbed over time.
You transform without any forced effort.
Exactly. The text explains that over time, as this energy superposes within you, your internal mass fundamentally changes. You become a denser, more capable version of yourself.
And because your internal mass has changed, your true skills, your wisdom, and your abilities will naturally emerge on their own.
You don't have to force them to the surface with willpower or discipline.
They just overflow naturally because the container itself has leveled up.
Exactly.
This translates into such a practical takeaway for everyday life. It strips away the metrics, the testing, the imposter syndrome, and gives you a very simple, very reliable compass for your intellectual and spiritual diet.
Which is?
If it is fun, if it's engaging, it is working. You are absorbing the energy and altering your mass.
But the moment it feels like a forced grind.
Right. The moment you are consuming a book or a podcast purely out of guilt or obligation, the absorption has stopped. You have basically put a lid tightly on the teacup.
It is an incredibly elegant philosophy. By completely removing the anxiety of trying to learn and the equally stressful anxiety of trying to let go, you allow your natural capacity to dictate your growth.
It's so liberating.
The source is telling us that true wisdom isn't something you can hack or cram or force to the surface. True ability overflows entirely naturally, but only once your inner mass has been filled through genuine, joyful curiosity.
So just to recap the journey we've been on today, we started with the very modern, very real paralysis of information overload.
We looked at how the deliberate effort to let go and relax is actually just another trap created by the ego's desire for control.
Then we explored the radical difference between standard knowledge, which requires force, utility, and memorization, and truth, which can only be absorbed naturally.
And finally, we arrived at this liberating idea of quantum superposition.
The realization that joyful curiosity is the only requirement for learning, and that the energy of what we enjoy permanently transforms our inner mass, whether we consciously remember the specific details or not.
It fundamentally shifts the burden of growth off of our conscious, anxious minds and places it onto the natural, invisible physics of our own capacity.
But, you know, hearing all of this laid out so clearly, it raises a really important question, something for us to mull over long after this deep dive is over.
I'm curious where your mind is going with this.
Well, the source establishes a very clear logic, right? Our very essence, our internal mass, is quantum energy that constantly transforms based only on what we naturally absorb and superpose upon ourselves.
That is the core premise, yes.
So what does that mean for our modern information diet?
Oh, wow.
Think about all the media we consume daily. The 24-hour news cycles, the toxic social media arguments, the content we force ourselves to read out of a sense of obligation or FOMO or even sheer outrage.
Right.
If it is not bringing us joy, if it is not naturally fitting our mass, what kind of energy are we forcing into superposition? If we structurally become what we absorb over time, what exactly are we becoming when we spend 2 hours doom scrolling every night?
That is a profound implication of this philosophy. If the joyful energy of truth builds a capable, wise inner structure, then the energy of constant forced anxiety must be superposing and building a structure as well. It
Exactly.
certainly makes you reconsider the actual cost of those 42 open browser tabs.
It really makes you want to aggressively but joyfully curate what you allow to capture your attention. Maybe the absolute best thing we can do with most of those tabs is just let them flow right past us. Just close the window.
Just let it wash away.
Well, on that note, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you walk away feeling a little lighter, a little less guilty about your unread books, and a lot more trusting of your own natural capacity to grow.
Absolutely.
So go out there and explore something new today, but only if it's fun. Catch you next time.